15 years ago, all UN member states unanimously committed themselves to protecting their populations from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. Following the genocides committed in Rwanda in 1994 and Srebrenica in 1995, the adoption of the responsibility to protect was a breakthrough to advance the protection of populations. The imperative was clear. We need to do more as an international community to protect people. 15 years later, the responsibility to protect remains as relevant today as it was in 2005. Sadly, we see atrocity crimes continue to be committed in many parts of the world, and we continue to witness grave human rights violations, including targeted killings, rape, torture, and forced displacement of people. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated the risks faced by vulnerable groups. We are seeing an increase in intolerance, hatred, stigmatization, discrimination, and violence, especially against minorities and women. On this 15th anniversary, it's important to remind ourselves what the responsibility to protect is really about. First and foremost, it's about the responsibility of individual states to protect their own populations. And this includes all the people within their borders, irrespective of their identity, their political affiliation, or their citizenship. But the principle also extends beyond this primary responsibility of individual states. There is also a responsibility of all states to support each other in fulfilling their primary task. And when states manifestly fail to protect their populations, the international community has a further responsibility to take collective measures to protect people and to prevent further atrocities from occurring. Despite the consensus that was achieved in 2005, prevailing misconceptions about what the responsibility to protect is remain. It's therefore equally important to underline what it is not about. Let me start by emphasizing that the responsibility to protect is not merely a foreign policy issue. Because all societies are potentially vulnerable and risk factors can be identified in every country, this agenda needs to be understood as a domestic one as well. What we are witnessing around the world and across all continents is very concerning. Rising nationalist sentiments are often expressed through increased intolerance and hate speech that targets minority groups and refugees. And here, no part of the world is spared. Let me also emphasize that the responsibility to protect is not about military intervention. It is important to be clear. The principle does not create a new mechanism for intervention or the use of force. Only when prevention has failed do states have the responsibility to take collective action in line with the United Nations Charter and existing international law. And even then, military action is the very last resort and can only be authorized by the Security Council. So it is not the principle of the responsibility to protect that has led to failures by the international community to avert atrocity crimes in places like Myanmar, South Sudan, and Syria, but rather a lack of political will to agree on an effective and collective response. What is required today more than ever is early action to prevent situations from escalating to the point where there's a risk of atrocity crimes. We know that these crimes rarely occur without warning. And as witnessed in practice, serious human rights violations are often precursors to atrocity crimes. So, by addressing early patterns of human rights violations and abuses, we can limit the risk of escalation. It is here that the role of civil society, regional organizations, and the UN's human rights mechanisms are essential, especially in terms of early warning. Now, this year's anniversary constitutes an important opportunity to intensify our collective efforts to protect populations from atrocity crimes, and also to hold perpetrators accountable for past crimes. Furthermore, to prevent risks from escalating wherever we witness rising hate speech, xenophobia, and systematic violations of human rights. This can only be achieved if the international community acts as one and works together to uphold the commitment. Ultimately, shared problems require collective responses, and we all have a part to play in ensuring that we live up to the promise of never again.